The hull breach alarm had been screaming for 6 minutes before I realized we weren't losing air. I was alone in the observation deck, watching the debris field we'd been mapping for 11 days. Standard survey work. The kind of mission where nothing happens except boredom and the slow erosion of your sanity from too much silence. But when that alarm started, everything changed. I ran toward the breach point, Deck 7, Section 12, and found Williams already there with a sealant kit. Except there was no breach. The hull was perfect. Not even a scratch. Williams looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on him before, something between confusion and carefully swallowed fear, and he told me the sensor logs showed a puncture 17 minutes ago. But the hull was fine. Had always been fine. We stood there while the alarm shrieked, and I felt the first cold finger of wrongness touch the base of my skull. Captain Rourke shut down the alarm manually. She didn't explain the malfunction. She didn't run diagnostics. She just shut it down, told us to return to stations, and when I tried to ask about the sensor logs, she looked through me like I was made of glass and walked away. That should have been the moment I pushed harder. But you never see it until you're already inside it. The survey work continued. We mapped the debris field. Chunks of what might have been ships once, or stations, tumbling through the dark in patterns that almost looked intentional, like they were circling something we couldn't see. I spent hours analyzing trajectories, trying to find the gravitational source that would explain the movement. There wasn't one. The debris just moved. Chen said it was probably residual momentum from whatever catastrophe created the field, but Chen said a lot of things that didn't make sense if you thought about them too long. Like how he'd been on the Heracles for 8 years. Except the Heracles was only commissioned 6 years ago. When I mentioned that, he gave me this small tight smile and said I must have misheard him. I stopped sleeping well around day 14. Not because of nightmares, but because of the sounds. Deep groaning reverberations from somewhere below the crew quarters, somewhere that shouldn't exist because I'd seen the schematics and there was nothing below us except empty cargo holds. But the sounds continued, and I'd lie in my bunk listening, trying to convince myself it was normal settling, temperature differentials, stress on the frame. Ships make sounds. But these had a rhythm. Almost like breathing. On day 16, I found a door I'd never seen before. I'd walked past that section of corridor 100 times, the same route every day, and the door had never been there. Unmarked. Gray. Sealed. I put my hand on it and the metal was warm, and I could feel that vibration again, that deep rhythmic pulse. The access panel didn't respond. I asked the ship's AI about it and the AI said there was no door in that location. I was standing in front of it. I could touch it. But according to every schematic, every sensor, it wasn't there. I found Williams in the mess hall and asked if he'd noticed any new doors. He stopped eating. His fork hung in the air between the tray and his mouth, his eyes went somewhere far away, and then he said no. Everything was normal. I should probably get more sleep. But his hand was shaking. The debris field was getting denser. We'd moved deeper into it, and now chunks of wreckage were close enough to make me nervous. Some of them were the size of buildings, tumbling slowly through the void. Captain Rourke kept us moving forward, barely speaking anymore, giving orders through the comm system while staying locked in her ready room. The few times I saw her in the corridors, she looked hollowed out, like something had been scooped out from behind her eyes. Day 19. I was running a metallurgical analysis on a debris sample, a twisted piece of hull plating with symbols etched into it that didn't match any known language. The analysis came back impossible. The metal was older than human spaceflight. Older than human civilization. The carbon dating said it had been manufactured 8,000 years ago, but the manufacturing techniques were advanced, far beyond anything we had now. I ran the test 3 times. Same result. I brought it to Chen and he glanced at the data, closed the file, and told me the equipment was malfunctioning. Stop running tests until we could recalibrate. But the equipment wasn't malfunctioning. That night, I went back to the door. Still there. Still warm. And this time, when I put my ear against it, I could hear footsteps on the other side. Someone was walking through a space that wasn't on any schematic, and I stood there listening to footsteps that couldn't be real. I checked the crew manifest. We'd launched with 14 crew. But when I pulled it up, it listed 17 names. 3 I didn't recognize. I went through my memory, every face, every interaction. I couldn't remember anyone else. But the ship said they were here. Said they'd always been here. I found McKenna in the engine room and asked her how many crew were on board. She said 14. I showed her the manifest. 17 names. She looked at the screen for a long time, her face going pale, then said the system must be pulling old data from a previous mission. But the Heracles had never had a previous mission. This was her maiden voyage. When I said that, McKenna walked away without another word. The debris field had patterns. I admitted it to myself on day 22. The pieces weren't randomly distributed. They formed vast spiraling structures that repeated at different scales, fractal patterns that drew the eye inward toward a center point that shouldn't exist. I spent 18 hours mapping every piece we'd cataloged, and the pattern was undeniable. It was a message. Or a warning. Something built into the physical arrangement of the wreckage, something that could only be seen from a distance. And we'd flown right into the middle of it. I tried to tell Captain Rourke. I went to her ready room and rang the chime. No response. I overrode the door lock using my maintenance credentials, something that could get me confined to quarters, but I had to tell her. The door opened. The ready room was empty. Not empty like she'd stepped out. Empty like it had never been occupied. No furniture. Nothing. Just bare walls and floor, and in the center of the room, etched into the deck plating, was one of those symbols from the debris. I backed out and sealed the door. Williams disappeared on day 24. During the morning briefing, his seat was empty. I asked where he was and everyone looked at me strangely. Chen said Williams had transferred off at the last port. We hadn't stopped at any ports. We'd been in deep space for 24 days. I said that. McKenna said I was confused, that I should report to medical for a cognitive assessment. But Williams had been here yesterday. I'd seen him. I searched the ship. Every deck. Every section. His quarters were empty, stripped clean. I checked the crew manifest again. 14 crew. No Williams. No record of Williams ever being on board. I found the alarm log from day 12, the false breach, and there was no mention of him responding. According to the log, I'd been alone. But I remembered him standing there with the sealant kit, that look on his face. The ship was changing. The corridor between my quarters and the observation deck was longer than it used to be. Not by much. Just enough to notice. The lighting was different in some sections, dimmer, with shadows that didn't match the positions of the fixtures. And the breathing sounds from below were louder now, and sometimes I thought I could hear voices mixed in with them, whispering in languages that made my teeth ache. Day 27. Chen was in the observation deck, standing at the viewport with his hand pressed against the glass. He didn't move when I entered. I asked if he was all right and he said he could see them now. Said they'd been there the whole time and he just hadn't been able to see them. I looked out at the debris field and saw nothing except wreckage tumbling through the void. I asked what he meant and he turned to look at me with tears running down his face. He said we'd found them. They'd found us. Didn't matter which came first because the result was the same. Then he walked out and I never saw him again. His name disappeared from the manifest that night. I tried to access the communication system. I needed to send a distress signal, needed to contact command. But the system said we were maintaining regular contact. Said we'd been filing daily reports. I checked them. Detailed. Thorough. Everything was normal. The survey was proceeding as planned. No incidents. No anomalies. No crew members vanishing. The reports were signed with my authorization code. I hadn't written them. But they were there, marked as sent, received, acknowledged. The door was open on day 29. The door that didn't exist. It stood open, and beyond it was darkness so complete it seemed to absorb the light from the corridor. I stood at the threshold for a long time. The breathing sound was coming from inside. The voices were coming from inside. And something else. A smell. Ozone and copper and something organic that made me think of the sea even though I was light years from any ocean. I stepped through. The corridor beyond was identical to the ones I knew, same design, same dimensions, but wrong in ways I couldn't articulate. The angles were slightly off. The walls seemed to curve in directions walls shouldn't curve. I walked forward because turning back meant accepting I'd never know, meant living with the fear forever. The corridor opened into a chamber. Vast. Too large to fit inside the Heracles. The walls were lined with something that might have been machinery or might have been organic, structures that pulsed with that same deep rhythm I'd been feeling through the hull. And in the center of the chamber, suspended in a column of light, was the Heracles. The entire ship. I was looking at my ship from the outside while standing inside it, and I understood then, with ice-water clarity, that we'd never been on a survey mission. We'd never been mapping the debris field. The debris field had been mapping us. The symbols on the walls were moving, shifting and reforming, and I realized they weren't symbols at all. They were cross-sections. Diagrams. Schematics of human biology, human psychology, human ships and systems and societies. We were being documented. Catalogued. The debris field wasn't wreckage. It was a net. A collection apparatus. And we'd flown right into it. I found the rest of the crew in the chamber. All of them. But they weren't there in any way that mattered. They were impressions, echoes, light patterns that moved and spoke but cast no shadows. Williams. Chen. McKenna. The three names from the manifest I'd never recognized. The captain. All of them together but separate, existing in states that didn't quite align with reality. They were being translated. That's the word that came to mind. Translated from what they had been into what they would become. One of them turned to look at me. I don't know which one. They all had the same expression, calm and empty and infinitely sad. And they said, in a voice that was many voices, that I was almost ready. The process took time. The human mind resisted, fought against the dissolution of self, tried to maintain continuity even as it was being rewritten. That's why the ship had to change slowly. Why crew members had to disappear gradually. Why the mission had to feel normal for as long as possible. To give us time to acclimate. To ease the transition. I asked what we were being translated into. The voice said we were being added to the collection. The beings who built the net had been collecting intelligent species for longer than human language could express. Every piece of debris in the field was a ship that had come before, emptied and catalogued and preserved. We were becoming part of the record. It was an honor. I ran. I don't remember leaving the chamber or finding my way back or sealing the door. I just remember running through passages that kept getting longer, kept branching in directions that shouldn't exist, until I burst into the observation deck gasping for air that tasted metallic and thick. The debris field had arranged itself into a perfect sphere around us. Every piece in exact position. A containment structure. And in the spaces between the wreckage, I could see them now, the collectors, vast shapes that bent light around themselves, that existed in dimensions my eyes couldn't quite process. They'd been there all along. We'd been inside their observation chamber from the moment we'd entered the field. The Heracles had never been doing the surveying. We were the specimens. Time stopped making sense after that. I checked the ship's clock and hours would pass in minutes, or minutes would stretch into eternities. More names disappeared from the manifest. The ship grew quieter. Emptier. Sometimes I'd encounter other crew members and they'd look at me with that same calm empty sadness, and I'd know they were further along, closer to becoming echoes. I'm in the observation deck now. I don't leave anymore. There's nowhere to go. The debris field is beautiful. Each piece glowing with its own light, each one containing the remnants of a species that came before, that flew into the net thinking they were explorers, thinking they were the ones doing the discovering. How many are out here? How many collections spinning through the dark, each one a library of extinct possibilities? The door behind me opens. I don't turn to look. I can feel them entering, the collectors, their presence like pressure behind my eyes. They're ready now. I'm ready now. The translation is nearly complete. Soon I'll join the others in the chamber, become another light pattern, another impression pressed into the record. Part of me wants to fight, to hold on to what I was. But that part is getting smaller. It feels almost like relief, this gradual letting go. The viewport shows my reflection and behind it the debris field and behind it the vast shapes of the collectors and behind that nothing, just the endless dark, and all of it is equally real, equally me. I'm being distributed across states. Translated from a single point of consciousness into something that exists everywhere and nowhere in the collection. My last coherent thought is this: we thought we were alone in the universe. We thought the silence meant absence. But the silence was full. It was always full. We just couldn't hear the curators walking between the shelves until they reached for us and lifted us down and opened us up to read what was written inside. The observation deck is empty now. The ship is empty. The logs will show a successful survey mission, routine operations, no anomalies detected. Another vessel will come eventually, drawn by the same patterns, the same mystery. The net is patient. The collection grows. And somewhere in the dark between the debris, new symbols are being etched. New schematics of a species that thought it was discovering the universe while the universe was discovering it.